When introducing Jesus Christ, we have to address the accusations made by a small but very vocal minority who claims that Jesus Christ was just a myth. Now, they start by rejecting the New Testament. The New Testament is the document that contains Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels, which tell us the life events of Jesus Christ. And the New Testament is our main source for the information we have about Jesus Christ. So if you can reject that, then you're on a pretty good start toward rejecting Jesus as a myth. There's a problem with that, though. The New Testament has 5,686 manuscripts, and the oldest is only 100 years from the events. And we actually have papyrus fragments that date within 30 to 50 years of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And the 100 years, 30 to 50 years, that may seem like a lot. If we waited 30 to 50 years to write someone's life story, you may think that's a lot of years, but by comparison, it's minuscule. The best attested ancient document next to the New Testament are the writings of Homer. And we only have 643 manuscripts. Now, that's actually a lot. But compared to the New Testament, it's 5,000 less. And Homer's 643 manuscripts consists of the oldest being 500 years from the original. So think of that by comparison. The New Testament has 5,686. Homer's 643. A difference of 5,000. The New Testament, we have them manuscripts dated up to 100 years from the events, and Homer is 500 years. And that's the best that you have to compare the New Testament by is Homer. The other writings of ancient, what we'd say of antiquity, include Aristotle, 49 manuscripts. The oldest is 1,400 years removed. Caesar, 10 manuscripts. 1,000 years removed is the oldest. And Plato, 7 manuscripts and 1,200 years removed. Now, these very same people who reject the New Testament and reject this manuscript evidence have no problem accepting the writers of Homer and Plato and Aristotle, which proves that they wear their bigotry on their sleeve. And if you're going to reject the New Testament, then let's stop teaching that we can know anything about Plato or Aristotle or the writings of Homer. There are other evidences for the existence of Jesus Christ, and that includes Christian writings. One of the closest to the events of Jesus Christ is from a saint named Papias, and around 90 A.D., just 60 years removed, less than 60 years removed from Jesus Christ. He speaks of how he inquired about the words of the elders, that is, whatever Aristion and the elder John, the Lord's disciples, were saying. So Papias claimed to collect his information from the apostles themselves or other disciples of those apostles, not very far removed from Jesus Christ. And then Quadratus wrote around 117 to 124 AD, and he said, quote, "The words of our Savior were always present, for they were true. Those who were healed, those who rose from the dead, those who were not only seen in the act of being healed or raised, but were also always present, not merely when the Savior was living on earth, but also for a considerable time after His departure, so that some of them survived even to our own times." There were children healed who lived a long time after Jesus rose from the dead and ascended to heaven, and they were around to testify. And if you're going to throw out that kind of eyewitness testimony, you pretty much have to throw out our court system. There aren't very many things in history that were based on convictions of someone being recorded in the act. We didn't even have cameras until recent decades. Before that and throughout history, it's been eyewitness testimony that we've relied on. And here we have eyewitness testimony to the existence of Jesus Christ. Now, it is true that because of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., a massive amount of evidence for Jesus Christ was destroyed. But we have plenty of other evidence with that in mind to prove beyond a shadow of any reasonable doubt that Jesus existed. Josephus was a Jew and he was a historian. And in Book 18, Chapter 3, Part 3 of his book, Antiquities, he spoke of Jesus saying, quote, "Now there arose at this time a source of further trouble in one Jesus, a wise man who performed surprising works, a teacher of men who gladly welcomed strange things. He led away many Jews and also many of the Gentiles. He was the so-called Christ," end quote. So Josephus wasn't a Christian by any stretch, but he testified, even though he was hostile, which is really a better testimony. When you have someone who doesn't even like Jesus and doesn't like the Christians, like Josephus here, he admits they exist. And so that's testimony in favor of the existence of Jesus Christ. In Book 20, Chapter 9, Part 1, Josephus wrote, quote, "So he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ." So there again, he didn't believe he was Christ, but he testifies that Jesus was a real person, and he lived, and he was called the Christ. We have other quotes. A Roman historian named Tacitus, who lived between 55 AD and 117 AD, he had a history collection called Annals. And in Book 15, he speaks of the Christians. And he says, quote, "Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate," end quote. You know, they used to teach Pontius Pilate never even existed. Then they found the writings of Tacitus and other evidence, and they had to start admitting Pontius Pilate existed. And here Tacitus makes reference to the Christians. Well, here Tacitus refers to his crucifixion. He had to exist if Pontius Pilate crucified him. Suetonius then makes reference to the Christians in the Lives of the Caesars, Claudius, section 25, quote, "He banished from Rome all the Jews who were continually making disturbances at the instigation of one Christus," end quote. Again, in Lives of the Caesars regarding Nero in section 16, quote, "Punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition," end quote. So again, Suetonius is a hostile witness. He doesn't like the Christians, but he said they existed. Julius Africanus, who is writing in his chronography, chapter 18, he refers to the darkness that settled at the time of the crucifixion, and he makes reference to Thallus and Phlegon to support the actual event. Now, the darkness over the crucifixion could only have happened if Jesus existed and was crucified. Pliny, who lived from 23 to 79 AD, very close, actually during the life of Jesus Christ and a short time afterward. In his letters, chapter 10, verses 96 through 97. Now, with all this in mind, we have to ask a question. If Jesus didn't exist, why aren't there any writings during those first 2 centuries of people who say these crazy Christians are following a myth? Even these hostile witnesses, Trajan, Pliny, Tacitus, Suetonius, Josephus, none of them said these crazy people are following a myth. Jesus never existed. None of them ever said that. They hated the Christians. They didn't accept Jesus Christ, but they never refuted His existence. Why would the Roman government brutally persecute peaceful followers of a non-historical figure? Why were tens of thousands of first century Christians, almost exclusively Jewish believers in Jesus as Messiah, who lived within 40 years of these supposedly mythical events, willingly suffered the loss of all their possessions, their status, and they were murdered in most cases? All of this just combines to give us ample evidence to prove and demonstrate beyond a shadow of any reasonable doubt that Jesus Christ really did exist. I'll just say this to you, if you're watching this and you've been playing these games, denying the reality and the existence of Jesus Christ, one day you are going to stand before Jesus Christ, and these games you're playing will no longer work. You'll stop playing games at that very moment, and you will be judged for having rejected your Messiah, your Savior.